The majesty of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome is also home to one of the greatest mysteries about the whereabouts of the tomb of St. Peter the Apostle.
1940, deep beneath St. Peter's Basilica, Vatican, workers tunneled in secret as bombs shook Rome. This was no rescue mission. It was a forbidden excavation ordered by Pope Pius XII to answer a heretical question. Is the faith of a billion built on a legend or on the bones of Peter himself? If the answer was wrong, the church's foundation would shatter. But as the ground opened, what they uncovered was stranger and more dangerous than anyone imagined. This is where the reckoning begins. In March 1939, as the world stood on the edge of war, a new pope took the throne of St. Peter. Pius XII was not a man of half measures. Within weeks of his election, he signed a confidential order that would shake the pillars of his own church. He authorized a clandestine excavation beneath St. Peter's Basilica, an operation so sensitive it was to be kept from the public, from most clergy, and even from many within the Vatican walls. The official reason was practical. Pius XI, his predecessor, had died that February and wished to be buried as close as possible to the Apostle Peter. But beneath the marble, workers stumbled on ancient walls and tombs that no one had seen in centuries. The discovery forced a decision. Pius XII assembled a special commission, appointing Monsignor Ludwig Kaas to oversee the basilica's fabric and bringing in Jesuit archaeologists, men like Father Antonio Ferrua and Father Engelbert Kirschbaum, whose loyalty and discretion were beyond question. The true purpose was never written in any public decree, yet every action pointed to a single, audacious goal: to settle, once and for all, whether the basilica truly stood atop the bones of Peter himself. If the grave was not there, centuries of tradition would collapse into rumor. If the bones were found, the faith of a billion would rest on stone and dust, not legend. The risks were enormous. The commission worked in the shadows, forbidden to speak, forbidden to publish. They tunneled at night, their shovels muffled, as engineers warned that a single misstep could bring down the basilica's soaring dome. Outside, bombs fell on Rome. Inside, the ground beneath the world's holiest altar began to yield its secrets. For Pius XII, the gamble was absolute. He staked the credibility of the church on the hope that beneath centuries of marble and myth, the truth would survive. The order was given. The reckoning had begun. Night fell early under blackout orders, cloaking the basilica in a hush, broken only by the scrape of shovels and the low murmur of men working by lamplight. Beneath the marble floor, teams of Sampietrini and trusted archaeologists, including Kaas, Ferrua, and Kirschbaum, moved with deliberate caution. Every stone they touched could shift the weight of the world's largest dome above their heads. The basilica's piers, each a mountain of masonry, pressed down on soil that had not seen daylight since Constantine's engineers buried the ancient cemetery centuries before. The war outside dictated their rhythm. Allied bombers droned in the distance, and air raid sirens sometimes sent workers scrambling for shelter. Underground, the commission faced another kind of threat. The basilica's foundations were never meant to be disturbed. Engineers injected reinforced concrete under the piers to keep the structure stable. Even so, every meter of tunnel had to be shored with timber and steel, every handful of earth removed by hand in silence to avoid cracks that could radiate up through the marble and betray the secret operation. Secrecy was absolute. The Vatican's blackout extended underground. No photographs, no press, no word to the outside world. Only a handful of men knew the true scope of the project. Night after night, they worked in suffocating humidity, crawling through corridors barely high enough to stand, their boots sinking into mud. The air hung heavy with the scent of old earth and candle wax. Each shift began with whispered prayers for the safety of the basilica above and for the souls buried below. Pressure was relentless. Mistakes could not be undone. In the cramped darkness, decisions were made quickly and sometimes without proper documentation. Bones and artifacts, when found, were often moved to the side or boxed up for later study, the chain of evidence fractured by necessity. The war, the secrecy, and the ever-present risk of collapse forced the team to improvise, leaving behind a trail of mysteries that would haunt the investigation for decades. Under the Vatican, danger did not come from the enemy above, but from the very ground itself, and from the secrets it refused to give up easily. The ground gave way to a hidden world, untouched since the days of the Caesars. Beneath the basilica's marble and gold, the archaeologists entered a narrow street lined with brick mausolea, their facades still standing after nearly 2,000 years. The passage was barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Every step echoed off ancient stone, the air thick with the scent of earth sealed away since the age of emperors. Lantern light flickered across painted walls, frescoes in deep reds and ochres, bursts of yellow and blue, mythic figures and banqueting scenes frozen in time, pagan gods and symbols jostled with the earliest hints of Christian hope, a silent argument scrawled in color and plaster. Family names in Latin and Greek marked the tombs, some carved with precision, others hurried by a grieving hand. Marble sarcophagi crowded the chambers, their lids heavy and still. In one, a child's toy rested beside a skeleton. In another, a faded portrait stared back from the gloom. The necropolis had not been pillaged or rebuilt. Constantine's engineers, centuries earlier, had simply buried it whole, entombing an entire city of the dead to raise the basilica above. The result was a time capsule, intact, silent, and waiting. Every surface told a story of Roman families, of forgotten cults, of a world that vanished beneath tons of earth. The excavators moved carefully, aware that each stone, each painted wall was a witness. Here, beneath the altar of Christendom, the ancient city of the dead waited to give up its secrets. Emperor Constantine arrived on Vatican Hill in the early 4th century with a vision that would reshape the landscape and the future of Christianity. The sight before him was not empty ground, but a crowded necropolis, an ancient city of the dead filled with mausolea and tomb-lined streets. To build the world's first great basilica, Constantine's engineers faced a monumental task. They did not simply clear the cemetery, they buried it whole. Over 40,000 cubic meters of earth were hauled to level the hill, entombing the necropolis beneath a new artificial plateau. The mausolea, their frescoes and sarcophagi, were sealed in darkness, untouched by grave robbers or later builders. Constantine's workers cut down the highest tombs, packed the spaces with rubble and clay, and poured a foundation thick enough to support marble columns and a soaring dome. The entire sacred zone, graves, altars, even the earliest Christian shrine, was locked away beneath tons of earth and stone. Above, the basilica rose as a monument to triumph. Below, the ancient cemetery became a silent vault, its secrets preserved by accident and design. For 16 centuries, this hidden world slept undisturbed, a time capsule waiting beneath the feet of millions. Only the boldness of Constantine's plan allowed the earliest traces of Christian devotion and the possible resting place of Peter himself to survive the centuries in darkness. Under the heart of St. Peter's Basilica, the search narrowed to a place spoken of in whispers since the 2nd century. Ancient writers described a monument known as the Trophy of Gaius, a modest shrine of brick and plaster that stood above what was believed to be Peter's grave. The excavators moved with measured precision, tracing the alignment of Constantine's high altar until they reached a structure different from the ornate mausolea that lined the necropolis street. Here, beneath the crossing of the basilica, they found a simple edicule, 2 short marble columns supporting a gabled slab, pressed up against a wall painted a deep, faded red. This wall, known now as the Red Wall, was built in the middle of the 2nd century, centuries before the basilica rose above it. Its rough plaster surface still bore the marks of ancient hands. The wall ran directly east to west, anchoring the shrine in place, just as tradition claimed. Above, Bernini's bronze baldachin towered, and below, this battered wall marked the spot that pilgrims had sought for generations. The Red Wall was not a monument to power or wealth. Its purpose was more elemental. It existed to shield and honor a grave that could not be openly venerated in an age of persecution. The plaster, tinted with crushed brick, had absorbed centuries of moisture and candle smoke. Its surface was chaotic, scored with scratches and overlapping marks, evidence not of vandalism but of desperate devotion. Here, beneath the altar, the searchers stood at the crossroads of history and faith. The clues were not written in gold, but scratched into plaster, waiting to be read. The The physical boundaries of the investigation had now closed around the red wall. The next answers would be hidden in the tangled language of the wall itself. Margherita Guarducci stepped into the shadows beneath St. Peter's with a different set of tools, her eyes trained not on bones or marble, but on words scratched by lost hands. The red wall, battered and faded, was her crime scene. Its plaster was a battlefield of marks, Greek and Latin letters, crosses, tangled monograms, each line carved in haste or fear. For years, scholars dismissed the chaos as nothing more than pious vandalism. Guarducci saw a code, layered and desperate, meant to survive the eyes of Roman guards in the silence of centuries. She mapped the graffiti, tracing where one prayer overlapped another, where the name of Christ hid within a jumble of letters, where the word Peter surfaced again and again. Most were invocations, half-names, or cryptic symbols, but one fragment stopped her cold. On a broken piece of red plaster, the Greek phrase Petros Ieni stood out, scratched with a trembling hand. The phrase was brief, almost abrupt. In the language of the persecuted, it meant only one thing. Peter is here, not a hope, not a rumor, but a declaration left by someone who believed the bones of the apostle rested just beyond the wall. Guarducci spent years untangling ligatures and hidden monograms, testing every alternate reading, weighing every doubt. The letters, she argued, were no accident. They matched the handwriting of a time when Christians could not speak openly, when faith had to be hidden in code. The fragment found in the field of pilgrim graffiti became the textual anchor for the search. The wall itself was a witness. The claim was explicit, scratched in Greek by a believer who risked everything to leave a message for the ages. Peter is within. The ground had spoken, not in relics or rumors, but in the unmistakable language of the hunted faithful. The marble niche behind the graffiti wall, sealed for centuries, was supposed to hold the answer. When the commission finally broke through, hearts pounded in the stale air. The cavity was lined with stone, just large enough to cradle a single body. But inside, there was nothing, no skeleton, no relic, only a hollow echo. The official field notes record the moment, a marble container perfectly intact, utterly empty. The silence in the chamber was broken only by the scratching of pens and the shuffling of boots on ancient dust. Monsignor Ludwig Kass hovered at the edge of the lamplight. He insisted on order and reverence, uneasy with the way bones were handled in the cramped tunnels. In the confusion and secrecy of wartime, Kass made a fateful decision. He instructed workmen to remove bones found in the niche and store them away, out of sight. No detailed inventory, no labels, just a box delivered to a dark cupboard in the fabric of St. Peter. The chain of evidence snapped in the shadows. For the archaeologists, the discovery was a blow. The red wall, covered in desperate prayers in the name of Peter, guarded an empty chamber. The physical proof, the bones themselves, had vanished. The team scoured their notes, questioned the workers, and retraced every step, but the niche remained bare. The official report could only state the obvious. The supposed tomb of Peter was empty. The investigation, once a live dig, became a cold case overnight. The commission was left with the mystery and a missing body. Kass's intervention, born from piety or unease, had erased the most crucial clue. In the hush beneath the basilica, faith and doubt pressed in from every side. The tomb was found, but the saint was gone. The Vatican's greatest secret now lay not in the ground, but in a forgotten box, somewhere above the crypt, waiting to be found. A battered shoebox, forgotten in a storage cupboard deep within the Vatican's labyrinth, held the answer that decades of searching had failed to deliver. Margherita Guarducci, relentless in her pursuit, tracked down the old workman who remembered storing it on orders from Monsignor Kass. The box was opened under the harsh lights of a laboratory, its contents laid out on sterile trays. Inside were bones, weathered, partial, but unmistakably human. Forensic anthropologist Venerando Carenti was called in to examine the remains. He worked in silence, measuring, cataloging, and reconstructing the story written in calcium and marrow. The results were precise. The bones belonged to a single man, aged between 60 and 70, of powerful build, The feet were missing, a detail that silently echoed the ancient tradition. Peter crucified upside down, his feet severed to hasten death or burial. The profile fit the man described in the earliest Christian texts, an old fisherman executed in Rome during Nero's reign. The bones were not bare. Fragments of cloth clung to them, their fibers still holding traces of a deep purple dye, shot through with the shimmer of gold thread. In the Roman world, only emperors and the highest priests were wrapped in such colors. To find these threads around the skeleton of a Galilean fisherman was a sign that, at some moment in history, the Church had honored these remains as holy beyond measure. Microscopic analysis revealed another clue. The bones were encrusted with red soil, so fine it had seeped into every crevice. This earth matched the mortar and dust from the niche behind the red wall, distinct from the fill of other tombs in the necropolis. The evidence was circumstantial but powerful. The remains had lain in that hidden cavity for centuries, sealed off from the world above. The chain of identity, once broken by secrecy and confusion, was now restored through science and persistence. In the hands of Carenti and Guarducci, the bones had finally spoken. Today, beneath the world's grandest church, the evidence still rests in shadows, bones, graffiti, and gold threads sealed in silence. As science and faith continue their uneasy dance, the ground beneath St. Peter's remains both sacred and contested. What lies buried isn't just history, it is the measure of what we are willing to believe. The search for truth here never truly ends.